me, Squibble, Orfeo, and Howard.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
So we got a very special episode today for all you guys, but unfortunately, super special guest ZoSo isn't here yet, so it's just going to be a regular episode for now. So, Howard, what do you want to talk about?
Hi. 1 second. Your microphone's actually coming through mine, so we should mute that for a sec.
Oh, no, my mic's muted.
Oh, it is?
Mhm.
Oh, I'm silly. Okay, I fixed it. All right. So yeah. All right. So yeah, Zoso's not here yet. He will be with us shortly. But in the meantime, we had some things to talk about. We're gonna save
We're
these.
very prepared.
Yeah, the Zoso specific topics for when Zoso gets here, like all the secrets to getting good. Only he knows those. But yeah, this weekend coming up is Mass Madness and the Workshop. Two big tournaments in one day.
Yeah, this is super exciting because Mass Madness is like the classic longest running tournament ever, except for like Man on the Ledge. Pretty sure it's the second longest running tournament series ever. And the Workshop, which is like the super chill multi FGC game community tournament, and the guy who runs it is like making his own indie game, and it's at this nice Mexican restaurant. So it's like really tough competition to decide which tournament you want to go to.
And I think that, what was it? The Workshop had some incentives, or what was that? Something else? No, I might be lying. Yeah, never mind. There's no fat sweet cash sacks of cash if you go to Workshop.
Yeah,
That's
I don't
just
think either have a pot bonus. They both have $10 singles entries, so they're going to be similar sized pots most likely. So I know me and Howard are going to Workshop, and Claps is going, but I believe Crush and Mafia are going to Mass Madness, and probably all the like far away, not really New England people are going there. So it's going to be really tough to choose like which tournament you want to go to.
Yeah, it seems like the top player base in Massachusetts or New England is kind of split not half and half. Definitely more going to Mass Madness, but there's going to be a good chunk from both. And speaking of top players, here is ZoSo. Hello, Dave.
That's very charitable of you. How's it going?
Pretty good, pretty good. Really good to have you on again.
Yeah, it's good to be on again.
Yeah, we were just talking about the Workshop Mass Madness split, and how some players are going to each tournament. And this is actually one of the first times we've had serious competition. Usually it's just one tournament kind of takes over, or the other tournament
or one's in Maine.
Yeah.
So one goes to that.
Oh, are they both this weekend?
Yeah, Workshop and Mass Madness.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
So you should pick the right one and go to Workshop.
Well, the thing is, so this is actually pretty exciting. The spring circuit, the New England spring circuit, starts this very weekend. Nothing that anyone has done until now matters. So in case you felt really bad because you were 33rd places on New Game Plus, none of that matters. It's a completely clean slate. And starting at this weekend, at both the Workshop and Mass Madness will be eligible for spring circuit points. And
well, I'm glad that they're both eligible.
Yeah, I believe Mass Madness will be more since it has more people. Since that's how that works. But I think that the competition will be not quite equally stiff at both of them, but hard at both sides. ZoSo, are you going to be coming to Mass Madness this weekend, or?
I honestly don't know.
Okay.
Because as I have mentioned, and as you guys are aware, I live in Central Connecticut now.
That's true.
Yeah, so and also my car is not in the best shape. So if somebody from around here wants to drive, I would consider going. But I also have like tentative plans this weekend, so I don't really know. It's going to be kind of like a on the day of if I feel like it. We'll see. But for now, I'm going to say probably not. But who knows?
Okay.
I will be paying attention to the results though. For sure.
It'll be very interesting at both because people will be trying their hardest.
Yep. Well, yeah. I would hope that people try their hardest.
I don't think people are going to be trying hard at Mass Madness. You guys should come to the Workshop if you want real competition.
Mass Madness is such a dark building, right? And it's really hot, and there's screens everywhere, so you're overstimulated, and That's just makes it really hard to concentrate, and it never runs on time.
I mean,
And they have
welcome
pools,
to
so you have to play for, like, 8
Smash
hours.
tournaments. Like, hey,
Don't hold back. Tell us how you really feel.
yeah, come on, Theo. Let's hear something really hateful.
Yeah, I'm actually on the same boat.
They don't have ventilation, so you get that like waft of people smell.
Oh,
you're one of those guys.
yeah. I believe in personal hygiene. I'm not gonna lie. I respect that. I mean, Mass Madness is great because it brings. I think Mass Madness is the only time that we can reliably see Connecticut in Massachusetts, right?
I mean, kind of, but even then, that's not reliable.
Yeah, semi-reliably. Like, I think Connecticut showed up to New Game Plus yesterday, and they did really well. Knocked out a lot of people. We'll get to that later. But I think the only time I see like Doom or people like that is at either Bust or Mass Madness.
And I'm glad they came out.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I really, really am fond of the Yukon guys, so I'm glad that they came out, and I'm glad that they, you know, they both had a good showing. Actually, I don't know how Doom did, but I know Keith did well.
I think he made it up to 9th.
Is Keith Icy's guy?
Yeah, he registered yesterday as Smoke 2 Blunts S2B.
What's his tag?
His name is Blunt Master.
Yeah.
And that was the first time. Oh, yeah. So yesterday was the last time you could enter as fake tags and still be eligible, which is why people went crazy. Eligible for Spring Circuit points. But yeah, I think Dave, you had some specific topics in mind you wanted to talk about.
Sure. There were a couple of things. So, okay, so I just want to clear this up because I know that it was discussed on the cast last time. I don't actually think wobbling should be banned. Just want to mention that because you know, it turned into this thing of like everybody tagging me on like Twitter or on Facebook every time somebody mentions wobbling, and I'm like the poster child for wobbling hate now. I don't actually think wobbling should be banned, so I just want to clear the air on that one.
You were the one who stirred the pot with the posts.
Oh, I totally stirred the pot, but like I hate on it because it's funny. I don't
it is kind of
actually think it should be banned, but the thread was pure gold in my opinion. You know, like if we're talking like tier list of New England shit posting, it was pretty high up there.
Yeah, I would agree.
So at the end of the last time I was on, I briefly mentioned that I would talk about why I think the scene sucks now.
Oh yeah, starting with the juicy stuff.
Right.
Okay.
So I'm gonna keep it brief, but I think regarding what's going on this weekend, I think part of that is oversaturation of tournaments, in my opinion. Because when we had Mass Madness, like not really so much as a monthly thing, like we would have it less frequently, and there weren't really any major weeklies, and there weren't really alternatives to Mass Madness around here. You know, there would be a tournament every once in a while, and a tournament was like more of an occasion. So if there was a Mass Madness, you know, we got like Mango and J-Man at one of them. We had Hacks at a bunch of them. We've had Mewtwo King at a few. We've had you know, like the guys from Maine would come down more often, even though I mean nowadays that's pretty much just Thorn. But like, you know, G Money and like the Moon, like those guys, they used to come out to stuff a lot more frequently, and I just never really see that anymore, almost at all. And I kind of have to feel like, you know, like if you look at New York, there's a Nebulous every weekend. Every single weekend there's a tournament that's like about the size of Mass Madness, which is okay, that's good. It's, you know, like that the scene can sustain that, and we're bringing in numbers from that, like the scene is growing. But I don't know, even here in New England, we see that, in my opinion, Massachusetts and Connecticut are really kind of insular. You know, like you don't really see Connecticut up here that much. Or I mean, I'm in Connecticut, so we don't really see Connecticut and Boston that much. And the Boston guys hardly ever go to Connecticut for anything. Really, like it almost never happens.
Yeah.
You know, you'll occasionally see Mafia go out to one of the tournaments at UConn, but it really almost never happens, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But I think we're kind of seeing this thing in the scene now because it's a lot bigger, and it's not all bad. In all fairness, there's obviously a lot of positive that has come out of it, but I think you're seeing kind of a thing where I think it's becoming more of a social thing for a lot of people. If you guys get what I mean. And I think if you, sorry, go ahead.
So you say that as if it's a bad thing, right? Like,
well, that's what I'm saying. I don't think it's strictly a bad thing, but for me, as a competitor, like going out to something like New Game Plus, I don't really feel like people go out to like test themselves, or at least I don't feel like everybody does. And I feel like a lot of people just don't. They go out, to have fun, and that's fine. I want tournaments to be fun. I have fun at tournaments, but it's like in the older days when we had fewer tournaments and the scenes from Boston down to like New York, even as far as New Jersey, I think we even had a wife, I remember, came up to a Mass Madness once. Things were much more incorporated then, and I think players were kind of made to feel responsible for their own improvement more, and the vibe in general was a little more serious and a little more competitive. But the flip side, and so I don't want to spend the whole cast talking about that, because I'm like a dinosaur basically in the Smash community, so I could talk about that for hours. But something that I in particular wanted to discuss, and it's kind of a result of the size and prevalence of the scene now, Smash on ESPN. Like I could not have ever conceived of anything like this happening 10 years ago.
So I hear what you're saying about how the culture has changed, and while I wasn't there for that, I 100% believe it. It's super friendly at New Game Plus, to the point where you're playing your friends, I think, pretty much every round of the bracket if you're considered one of the top 8, right? Like, that's just what it's become. And I can definitely see some perceived downsides to that, since it's harder to be cutthroat competitive. Some people still are, by the way. If you talk to Mafia or Pedro or Class.
Oh, I have no doubts that Theo would kill everybody in the building.
Yeah, like given the opportunity.
Right.
So I hear what you're saying, that it's never quite as diehard, because there's always next week, right? Like, even if it's not next week, maybe even the Friday of, right? There's another tournament with most of the same people. So I can definitely feel that there's a less sense of urgency, right? Especially at some of the people there who are less interested in getting to be a top player as soon as possible. But at the same time, I don't know how often the previous Mass Madnesses were before it became a once a month kind of thing. But we still have a bust like once every 6 months, and once a year or so. And that still draws in the top names like Swedish or like Kage when he can actually make it. And it still draws in that kind of competitive spirit. And sure, it's like filling in that scene, the average Melee tournament isn't quite as diehard. I need to play my heart out. I need to place my best ever, or it's the end of the world. Like it may have used to be. But I think that you still definitely get those tournaments. And like you were saying, Genesis was broadcast on ESPN, I believe.
Well, I don't know if Genesis was, but I know that ESPN is going to be working with Smash, which is unbelievable.
I mean, that's completely crazy.
There were like 2 articles about Smash on the ESPN website in the last week or 2. That's unbelievable.
But if you liken that to like basketball, there are people playing pickup basketball or whatever, club basketball, or like intramural, or working your way up to varsity, whatever, at every level, and it's happening every single day. And they go to like travel teams every week, and not every one of those is being broadcast on ESPN, right? Only the pinnacle, the top of the top. So I hear what you're saying, that it's not quite as urgent all the time. But I don't think it needs to be, as long as we preserve that urgency and that need for. I mean, we all play this game of Melee because we want to beat each other down, and we still get those. We still get those large tournaments, and I'm glad that we still have that.
Yeah, and like I said, it's not like I'm just like, get off my lawn, you kids, because I get that people want to come out, they want to have a good time, but I just think there's kind of a balance there of still having more tournaments, but like, for example, I would like the scene to be more incorporated, specifically here in New England, and I would like there to be a little more intermingling between, you know, Boston and like central Connecticut scenes at least, if not like, you know, people who are further south. But like, there's other contributing factors to that we can't really control, and one of them is that a lot of the people in the scene now are like college age kids. A lot of them don't have cars.
Yeah.
You know, and even if you do, it's not really the easiest thing to like get out and drive for 2 hours every weekend.
Get everywhere in Boston by like the T or bus or something.
Yeah, right, and that means that a lot of Boston players tend to stay in Boston and play at tournaments in Boston, which is fine. It's just things are different, and I wonder if people saw what the scene used to be like, if they wouldn't want more of that kind of vibe. You know, because I was really close with people from all over back in those days. Whereas I feel like Boston now, in particular, is very insular. I think, you know, a lot of the Connecticut, like there's like little cliques of players who play with each other. And I don't know, things are just different. You know, I guess I should just accept it for what it is, because clearly a lot of good has come out of it too.
Well, Tian was talking about that a couple of casts ago, where he tried to plug that people should travel more because you learn so much from traveling and you build relationships that you wouldn't otherwise. And I think that in particular, I want to shout out Pete Makari, who regularly, I regular is the wrong word, but as often as he can, buses people down to HOG, which is the Connecticut local. And it's the problem is there's only 2 or 3 people who are willing and able to do that, and they're amazing, and they make the interconnection between the scenes work.
We're really lucky to have Pete in the scene.
Oh my goodness!
I'm just gonna say that he's an excellent guy. And I think he's like right on the cusp of becoming an excellent player.
I think he's in the process of breaking out as we speak.
He's beaten most of the people on this show right now.
Yeah. And like the thing about Pete, I'm just gonna shout him out a little bit more, is that you've always sensed that he could do it. He just hasn't yet. He's just still putting together the pieces. But I think it's all falling into place. Anyways,
So the thing that I wanted to, segueing from there, Smash on ESPN, I was talking to Shi about this, and the first thing that he mentioned was the possibility of Melee HD, because that's
so that's not just a scam.
Well, no, it's not that it's actually going to happen, because so I don't want to start any like rumors flying, but
did you hear ZoSo confirm Melee HD
right, exactly.
2016?
Yeah,
so
God, we have to buy Wii U. This is terrible.
It's just starting to seem more possible, and like maybe even more likely every year, because like it's kind of easy for competitive players to want Nintendo to be like Santa for the Smash community.
That would be,
or like the same thing as like people kind of want to see Capcom that way for the FGC, but they're a business and they want to support that scene and keep it growing, but they also need to be making money off of it, and they need to be making money off of their IP. But like, is anybody not gonna buy Melee HD?
Like, even if it's terrible, I'd buy it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's also like one of the best-selling titles ever.
So
yeah,
go on.
For the time, like it sold like 10 million copies, which isn't that much nowadays.
Yeah,
but at the time, it was amazing.
It was also on the GameCube, which didn't sell.
It sold like 10% less than the amount of GameCubes.
Yeah. So I think we should, in that case, it's going to be weird. I think if we want Melee HD, we have to hope Nintendo runs out of money. Because that's what happened with Square, right? They were holding out for Final Fantasy VII HD for years and years and years and years. And then they were like, fine, we're almost out of money. We know what will make us money, right?
See, that was the funny thing to me, because I think somebody from Square Enix said that they wouldn't remake Final Fantasy VII until they felt a game from the current era of Final Fantasy lived up to that standard of quality.
Mm-hmm.
That was what they said. And like, I mean, did they really do that? Does anybody think they did that?
I think Final Fantasy XIV was pretty good, but the online.
Which one was that? What was the
one?
It
was the one that no one played. That was online.
And what was the one they just put out that was on the Xbox? The M-rated one.
They made an M-rated Final Fantasy?
I think so. It was a pretty big deal that they made an M-rated Final
Fantasy.
Fantasy.
What happened to my childhood?
I don't know, but like, I mean, it just makes sense for them to do that because
Yeah.
everybody wants it.
It's printing money, right? Like,
Basically.
not too many companies will say no to printing money. The thing about Nintendo is that they want to protect their brand in a way, right? Like,
Yeah.
just the thought of Melee being at Evo caused them to issue. Was it a proper cease and desist? I think it was.
Think so.
It was. I mean, that's a huge deal. Like
Oh,
the fact
Project
that
M?
not Project M. I'm talking about just Melee at Evo.
2013 Evo.
Oh,
Shut
yeah.
down the stream.
Yeah, and
There was
they don't.
something like that. They said so. The thing is, Nintendo told them not just that they couldn't stream Melee, but tried to tell them that they couldn't do the event at all.
Yeah.
And the people at Evo were like, "You can't tell us that." Basically, like, fuck off, pretty much. And then Nintendo was like, "Well, fine, but you still can't do Melee." And then we all know how that turned out.
So as much as we love Reggie, I think that we have to accept that Nintendo is not super happy with hyper-competitive gamers taking their Mario characters.
Nintendo is, right? It's just Sakurai himself.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think they're starting to demonstrate more of a willingness to work with us. But
I think that's true, but I think that Nintendo liked to prop themselves up for a long time as kind of the Disney of video games,
true.
right? They've tried to brand themselves as like the fluffy, this lovable plumber who everyone loves, and they didn't want, because like Melee is brutal, right? Melee is hardcore in a lot of ways.
You can make DK hit a Pokeball with a baseball bat. That's so cool.
Yes, but not the way we play it.
Yeah.
There's no DKs and there's no Pokeballs and there's no baseball bats the way we play it.
We don't even play in camera mode.
Yeah, exactly.
because we hate fun.
Yeah, we sometimes that's the image it portrays. So I think that while it may be a little less true now, Nintendo has just as recently as 3 years ago, grudgingly gotten over the fact that competitive Melee exists.
Not just exists, is huge.
It's thriving,
Yeah.
bigger every year.
Like Melee is making people money, and it's not even. It's
Okay.
not even through developer support, which I don't think any of the other like top 6 esports are doing.
But on this subject, what I was curious about, I guess, is it just me, Theo, and Howard right now?
Yes,
Yeah.
we are
Okay.
missing.
So, 2 to 3 things that you would like to see in Melee HD. Go ahead.
I'll go first because I've thought of this already.
Okay.
Yeah, sure, everybody has.
The first one is Ledge Invincibility has to not be the way it is.
Yeah.
Like lower it. It's right now. It's what, half a second of Ledge Invincibility. Fox can get 2/3 of the way across Yoshi's story before he's hittable. Yeah, that's not okay. So I think everyone would agree with that. That would just
sure.
make the game.
Yeah, that needs to be reworked.
Yeah.
And hopefully a not hugely impactful way, but it should be different.
The worrisome thing is that if they wanted to, Nintendo could totally be like, we're just going to remove L canceling and stuff like that, and which would be like, I don't actually know how I feel about L canceling.
I'd be okay with no L canceling, and that's something I've thought about pretty hard actually. I would be okay with no L canceling,
Yeah.
as long as aerials still don't have a lot of lag.
So every character is like Peach, basically. You just press buttons. and
No, I don't think that's a little extreme. I think, but they should have non-L canceled lag without you having to L cancel them. I think that would be perfectly fine. The only reason why I don't like that is because there are things you can do to get people to miss L cancels.
Yeah. You can like tilt light shield and things.
Yeah, right. Or you can spot dodge when they think they're gonna hit you. Like that's a spacey thing. So I can see there being reasons why it adds an element of thought, but in general, I don't really like mandatory button presses.
I'm going to go hardcore into saying that I'm going to defend L canceling. And this is coming as the guy who plays a character who doesn't L cancel very often. But I think that by L canceling, you kind of force an interactivity with the game that very few games have, right? Like every time you do anything in Melee, it's so deliberate, right? Anytime you dash dance, anytime you jump, anytime you land.
You can't really mash in Melee. It doesn't work at all.
There's like if you do anything that's not precisely calculated, or you're and not in a way that your opponent can trick you, you get messed up by an opponent who's slightly more precise. And I think that in some ways people might consider it not the greatest that so much of the game comes down to tech skill. I think it makes it much more personal because every single thing you do in Melee like has to have a purpose behind it. You don't accidentally drill shine someone, right? Like that's just not something that accidentally happens. Everything is so intentional, and maybe like 1 in 1,000 times, right?
Like tried to multi-shine and I wind up doing drill shine.
Yeah,
it's just kind of reasonable.
So I think while it definitely makes the execution barrier high, I don't think that makes it worse, right? Like look at the greatest competitive games ever made, like StarCraft. Brutally execution difficult, like to the point where
Brood War is, I think, pretty unequivocally the most technical game ever made.
And it was
nothing is at that level yet.
Yeah, and it was considered by many people to be the greatest competitive video game ever made.
Well, I mean, that was the original esport.
Yes.
You know? Like that paved the way for everything else.
And even in soccer, right? Everything you do with a ball is really hard, right? That's why it's impressive. So I think while glorifying test skill for its own sake, like West balls, may not always have its place, I think that L canceling really gives the game a lot of the flavor that it would be missing without it.
That's fair.
And it's also very satisfying to hit more buttons.
It really is.
It's a really stupid thing, but just hitting that L or R after every aerial, and you get in a rhythm, it's almost like a musical thing when you press all these buttons.
That's an interesting way to look at it.
And also, people should just get better and option select their L cancels by mashing LRZ in a triplet timing, so they never mess it. And
that's actually a pretty good idea because you can. That's one of the things in the game where you can input as many L cancels as you want.
Yeah, and you do soft hits, not like tagging. So you can still tag.
Yeah. That's interesting.
That's like hell hard.
I personally never press. I personally never press the L button, so that wouldn't really work for me.
That is interesting.
You could learn.
I could learn.
But then you couldn't ever tech anything and would die.
No, you do soft hits. You can soft hit L cancel. If you don't soft hit L cancel shuffle as a spacey, your hands will die.
Is that what I'm doing wrong? Okay, I should stop playing Fox.
Yeah.
Yeah, so somebody in the chat said that without L canceling it would allow casuals to enjoy the game more, and that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Wobbling wouldn't be as dumb.
I guess. I mean,
wobbling's going, right? We can all agree that come Melee HD, wobbling is just right out.
See, I thought about that, and my knee-jerk reaction is, yeah, Nintendo would probably want to get rid of that, but I was thinking about it, and it's like, I would be okay with that if Ice Climbers are made better, and then I realized I have no idea what that would look like at all. You know, like I have no idea how you would change them in a way that didn't lead to something else that was degenerate. You know, and like the other thing is, how exactly do you get rid of wobbling? Do you like make F tilt? You know, like do you make the capture damage animation not as long?
Do you leave in Blizzobbling?
Well, in Smash 4, they just removed them from the game, right? That was one option.
Well, that's one way to do it, I guess. But yeah, that was you know, like there are other permutations of it you can do. You know, like there's forward tilt. There's down tilt. I think there's a way that you can do it with jab, IISA frames on jab.
You can do it with just Blizzard.
Yeah, right. You can do it with Blizzard. So I feel like it's likely that it would remain in some form. And like, you know, as I think we discussed this like 2 weeks ago, they have a couple of matchups that they can't win basically no matter what unless they have wobbling. So
I mean, even with wobbling, they're not that winnable either.
Yeah, right. But you know, I mean, I'm fine with them having it because they need it.
I don't think balance is that important to a game. Like this might be considered a controversial statement, but I would be okay with not rebalancing the game too much. Like top tiers will still be top tiers, low tiers will still be low tiers. Maybe you can trim a little things that are really dumb, right?
Give Kirby a good dash attack.
Yes, give Kirby a dash attack that you would actually use.
That's
give
the only change that they need.
You could make Kirby's dash attack broken like they did in PM.
Yeah,
it's shield pressure.
I mean, Kirby would still be terrible. That's fine. Like, I would be okay with like changes like that. But I don't think that having more than Melee has probably 8 viable national winning worthy characters, right?
Yeah, it's like
national winning. It's less than 8.
If you're going down all the way to Peach, I think that's 8.
Based on what we're currently seeing, then
do you think Peach is 8th?
She's like 7, isn't she?
No, Peach is like 6th.
Okay. Well, I believe Falcon can do it someday.
I used to believe in Falcon, And then I played Fox, and I stopped believing in Falcon.
But anyways, my point is, as long as you have a couple of matchups that are really interesting and people are able to continue to push the envelope, I don't think you need a cast of 30, right?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of been like proven almost across the board. You know, like in a game like StarCraft, if one race loses to the other two, then bye bye. You know, like nobody's going to bother to learn that basically. And I mean, if they did, they'd probably be, you know, fan favorites, but they wouldn't win anything. But like, you know, you look at great fighting games like in Super Turbo, it was pretty obvious who the best characters were. In Marvel 2, it was really obvious who the best characters were. In Third Strike, it's really obvious who the best characters are. And all of those games are, you know, so enduring and so widely loved.
Yeah,
you know?
that's interesting that we all agree on that. Because one of the first things that people say whenever they're like new Melee is like better balance, right? Not less foxes.
And who cares?
I think a lot of the people who say that, and this is definitely a little dismissive of me, but I think a lot of the people who say that don't really understand what they're asking for. Interesting sidebar, another person who agrees with this position that you don't need to make a perfectly balanced game is Sakurai. And he said in an interview that he thinks perfect balance should never be the goal, and that it actually removes, like it has no personality, basically. Which, you know, I think we should probably make, an effort should be made to make Melee more balanced than it is. Mm-hmm. But I would do that by buffing the shit characters, the worthless characters who you never see, rather than by dragging everybody else down to like kind of this really boring, like, you know, flavorless kind of middle ground.
Make every character as good as Mark, so to speak.
That's the great thing about
that's overshooting a little bit.
Yeah. In my opinion. All the top characters are so different, and like do flashy stuff. So Melee, like if Jigglypuff was the best character, Melee would be like the worst game ever made. Because it's Fox, Falco, Sheik, and Marth, they're all fast and they're all very different, and it's like amazing to watch.
Well, the thought of even one Jigglypuff in Grand Finals was enough to put some people to sleep, so I'm really glad that
it made PP quit Melee.
Well, yeah, I mean, the salt isn't going anywhere.
Yeah, that's true. That salt is forever, no matter what gets patched.
But it's so good.
I don't know if you guys followed the release of HD Remix at all. Like the Street Fighter 2. Yeah, nobody really played it. So maybe this kind of invalidates everything I'm about to say, but I read a series of articles that David Sterlin posted on his website talking about the process for rebalancing the game. And his is actually pretty simple. You leave the top tiers alone, you buff the bad characters, and you remove abusable things.
I like that.
Yeah, and by that he means, the example he gave was Balrog in Street Fighter 2. The boxer, I guess, if we're using like no, it was his low jab rush punch, which is safe on block, and even if your opponent could conceivably punish it, you can then follow it up with your headbutt, you know, like, which is basically his DP, and the jab version of that is also safe on block. So you have move that hits the whole screen and is safe. If they try to do anything, you have invincible move that is also safe, and doing this builds a huge amount of meter. So basically, like with that one in particular, he was like, all right, something's got to give here, because his super hits full screen and does like 70% and is also safe. So something there clearly needs to get tuned. So I would say, like, you know, does Sheik really need to be able to chain grab the whole cast for 70%?
Yeah, it's okay if you take that away from her. They already did in PAL. I think PAL was in the right direction, right? They slightly nerfed some of Fox's moves.
I agree, but for every change... Really for every change that made sense in PAL, there were like 4 that are just like, what the hell were they thinking? Like Ganondorf is unplayable in PAL.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, like a bunch. Yeah.
But they weren't looking after the 1v1 perspective from Ganondorf, presumably.
Yeah, and a lot of Yoshi's moves are randomly nerfed.
All right, so we spent a lot of time on this, but what were your guys' one thing you would change?
Oh, I'll change 2 things.
2 things. Okay.
So first, you make more stages and take out all the stupid stage crap. So we have like Pokemon Stadium 2, no transformations. We have like a one only top platform stage. We have no Shy Guys. We have no wind. We have like a triangle stage that could be cool. Just like more stages that are not stupid. And that would be really cool, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, new game. So now Razer makes a fight stick so I can have my hands do things. Because the GameCube controller is actually awful. I don't get why everyone loves it for Melee. It's like the stupidest input system for this game.
Okay, well that segues well into the next thing that I think we should talk about. But my things, I would probably wouldn't remove all canceling, but I would make ease execution a little bit across the board.
Okay.
Like I think smash turning is way too hard.
Yeah.
That's just dumb.
Stupid, and it's just the result of an oversight in the game. It shouldn't be that way. It's just dumb. I think some of the PAL changes are in the right direction, but I would be more interested in seeing viable low-tier characters. Like characters that are interesting instead of just like entirely being reliant on one gimmick. I think that would be good, and I think probably the biggest one is netplay with decent netcode.
Yeah, so that would be a good laundry list, and those are all very reasonable things to ask for, right? Like none of the things we asked for.
Yeah, if that GGPO netplay, that would be awesome.
I don't know if that would work for Smash.
You can't really do predictive algorithms in Smash the way you do for
but then all other netplay systems are terrible for fighting games.
Yeah, we probably wouldn't have good netplay.
So it work in Japan because everyone lives a foot away from each other with like the best internet in the world.
Well, that's true, but the other part of that, they were actually talking about this on Alex Valla's stream last night. It was, I think the examples he gave were Mortal Kombat X and Killer Instinct. But I think the really specific example he gave was Killer Instinct, and he basically said like, "Wow, this game has amazing netcode. Like the net play is excellent, but nobody's playing the game." Mm-hmm. So he was kind of looking forward to having a really good netcode with something like a AAA game like Street Fighter V.
Yeah, it's almost like a waste at that point. But anyways, so Dave, this is something that you wanted to talk about for a while, and it's I believe you were segueing into this the concept of controller modification.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So would you like to tell us a little bit about your controller?
My controller, so I've been playing with the springs out on my triggers for years, many years, and honestly, I think if I could go back and learn it again, I probably wouldn't have done it. I probably would have kept light shielding and just, learn to work around it. But the reason, interestingly, the reason I originally took the springs out in the first place was to use it as a Brawl controller. Because in Brawl, the partial press doesn't do anything. Correct. So that I would get hit by a lot of things and think, man, if I had like another couple of frames because I was depressing the trigger and it doesn't actually shield until it gets to the very end, it's like, man, I probably wouldn't have gotten hit by that. Then I decided that Brawl sucked, but I still like the controller for Melee. And I remember I never really thought about it this way, but the Crimson Blur said that he feels one of the main reasons that people have problems with their hands is because of the triggers.
I hear that.
You have to press really hard.
Yeah, you do, and it's I agree with that. So I think at least like shortening the springs a little bit and having less tension is probably good. But I don't know. I see a lot of people complaining about the Cardano controllers, and it just seems really out of place in my opinion. Mm-hmm. I don't know if anybody agrees.
So we've actually talked a little bit about this before. Yeah. Theo, would you like to?
Well, I believe all of us have done the shield drop mod, right? And that allows you to do a perfect shield drop by tilting the controller stick to the side and then pushing it into the southeast or southwest notch. And which you can do, like on my current controller, I can do it on the right side, and I didn't have to do anything. And there are some controllers where you can do it on both sides with no modifications. It's just out of the box works.
Mine was like that when I got it. Mine was like that when I got it, but then it stopped being able to do that.
So then your stick gets looser, right? But if you shave the controller, you can make any controller perfect for shield dropping. You don't have to buy
that's what I did with my current one.
So I think at this point, most people are okay with that, just because it means you don't have to spend $200 playing the controller lottery to buy 20 controllers to see which one works.
Yeah,
right?
see, that's the problem I have, because with good controllers already being relatively scarce, and that number I think is only going to dwindle with time. Just, I mean, I think it's just a good direction for the scene to go. And even though in Kadana's case specifically, he said that he doesn't feel it's like a permanent solution, because a lot of those controllers are going to wear down and you're going to have the same problem.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did was a little more controversial to that to my controller. So I was having trouble getting maximum length wave dashes to the left just because my thumb didn't do it, right? Like the particular notch. Well, the particular notch, because every controller's stick box is a little rotated. If you look at the hardware,
yeah,
it's like it's not directly, and so mine was actually rotated clockwise, like a significant amount. So
yeah, and I thought that was really interesting because I never realized that.
Yeah, it's just completely like random and arbitrary. And if I wave dash to the right perfectly, like on command, if I think I could get like Luigi across FD in like 1.5 wave dashes or whatever it is. But on the left, it would take me like 3. And so I was like, I have enough of this. I like sat down and I practiced it for a long time. I just couldn't get it to work consistently because it was like at a very specific angle. So I notched my controller and I could get perfect wave dashes every time. That way. And I think that people consider that a little more controversial because it's like getting tech skill you don't have, right? Because not everyone has perfect wave dashes. Even among good players, they all do different things differently. Mm-hmm. And so people were concerned about where do you draw the line, right? Because it's like cheating in a level of skill that you may or may not have. And I think controller modding does get controversial at some points. I think that the hard rule that people have stood by since the beginning of this kind of stuff happened was 1 input, 1 output, right? 1 button press, 1 output.
Yep.
So is that good enough for Melee?
Well, let me give you an example. In Street Fighter, so does everybody know what plinking is?
Yes. You should explain it anyway.
Yes.
Though.
Okay, so plinking is basically a thing. It has to do with ambiguity in the way that Street Fighter 4 interprets inputs. And it's so when you do an EX move, which is a special move with 2 punches or 2 kicks, depending on the move, you can burn a little meter to get a stronger version of that move. And in the interest of making it so you don't have to push the buttons on exactly the same frame, which is what you have to do in Third Strike, and it makes it a little annoying to get them out. If you press, for example, strong on one frame, strong medium punch, and then jab or light punch on the next frame, if you look at like the input reel, like the display in training mode, you get 1 frame of jab, or no, 1 frame of strong and then 1 frame of strong and jab. So the reason this is important is because the game assigns priority to buttons based on, you know, kick overrides punch and heavy overrides medium, overrides jab, in that order. So it just kind of goes across, you know, it goes heavy kick, heavy punch, medium kick, medium punch, and so on. So this basically gives you 2 opportunities. Like if you have a 1 frame link, you now have 2 chances to hit that 1 frame link, which is really important, as you can imagine, for making things easier to do consistently.
So for those of you who aren't too into Street Fighter or frame links and all that, basically it doubles the window that you can do stuff.
Yes, exactly.
Which makes it more than twice as easy.
So something that a lot of people didn't know until the last year or 2 is that you can actually, even though jab is the lowest priority input, you can plink jab. Does anybody know how you plink jab?
It's with a button that's on the back of the stick.
With the select button. You can plink jab with the select button. So a lot of players, like top players, excellent players, had the buttons on their controller remapped so that they could, and I don't mean like changing it in the like in the controls of the game. I mean like rewiring the buttons in their controller so that they could plink jab with select and make something that like involves a 1 frame link with your standing jab, make it more reasonable.
But they had to rewire their entire controller, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, not all of it, but enough of it to accommodate
the button that's
this.
usually on the back, and so you don't accidentally pause.
Yeah, and I think they put it somewhere on the face of the controller because a lot of fight sticks have 8 buttons on the face, and it's intended so you go jab, medium, fierce, and then 3 punches would be the last button. So you can use that for like ultras or EX moves if you want. But as far as I know, nobody was ever like reprimanded for this.
But a lot of people hated it.
Yeah.
Like, even though no one ever got banned from a tournament for doing it. First of all, it's hard when Daigo and Sako and, like, the literal gods of your game are doing it. You're not going to ban them for your tournament. So there's that. But, like, a lot of players just absolutely hated it. Because while some of us might think it's not that much work or effort, or it's not that hard to open it up, a lot of people think that's completely beyond them. And I don't think that's an unreasonable line to take, right? I shouldn't have to open my controller up to be on an even playing field. But
well, I would argue that you shouldn't need to be able to consistently press a button within 1/60th of a second to play your character.
Yes.
So I mean, I think there's that way of looking at it, but the way I see it in a fighting game, like, am I physically able to do something is important. But I think, is this the right time to do whatever it is that I'm trying to do? Is this the right time? Should be the priority. That should be the first question, not, am I able to do a standing 720, for example, like in Street Fighter terms. And on the one hand, like, it's really inspiring to see people execute those things like so fluently and just do it like it's no big deal when it's like so hard for the average person. It's cool, but I mean, is it really necessary to like jump through all those hurdles?
So
also, shut up, Blale, or Blaye. That's not funny, man.
So on that note, so on execution. So I promised in the little blurb that we would talk a little bit about improving, or the secrets to improvement, and we haven't done too much of that. So I wanted to pick your brain on something.
Okay, I'm just saying, if anybody in the chat says improving as a region, I'm kicking them from the channel.
Okay.
What if I say it?
That's fine.
we have to approve as a region,
guys.
Top player privilege.
Mod privilege is more like what it's like. But what I've been thinking about a lot recently was the concept of choking, and like the physical concept of choking, where you're just like, God, my character just won't do anything, and you see this happen to everyone, like literally everyone. I think at Genesis, while we were watching, there were definitely some players that started choking on stage, right? Like, that's just the thing that happened in top 8 even, right? Like, suddenly Fox just stopped doing Fox things and started turning around in place and then got edgeguarded and died, right? Yeah, it was brutal to see, right? And it happens to everyone, and it doesn't happen when you're playing your best friend, but it does happen at when you're in super high pressure situations. Or maybe it does happen to your best friend. Maybe it gets super personal between you, I don't know. But I was thinking about this, and it definitely has happened to me more often than I would like. And I started breaking...
The hilarious part is that it happens to literally everybody.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Like,
to the absolute highest level of play.
Like you've heard Armada say, no, for Genesis, yeah, I choked. It was... I made bad decisions, and I need to get better for next time. And this is like literally Armada saying this.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about this, and how do you to avoid the really, really, like, I mean, everyone's gonna make tech flubs in high pressure situations. That's just always gonna happen. But the thing to avoid in my head, at all costs, is the moment when you just can't do anything, right? We've all been there, where your character is just like, it just runs off the stage and dies. Or
your hands like mold together into like a homogeneous like pile of just like skin, and
it's crazy that you can still like walk back and forth while even doing that.
Yeah. And like part of that is melee is hard and execution is hard, but that's not all of it, right? Like, practice will only get you so far unless it's like the right concerted practice. So this is I've had an idea, some ideas for this that I've been trying to some success, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. The first one is when you roll, like, a lot of the times when people roll, they do something terrible immediately after, right? And it's not necessarily the roll that's terrible, it's the thing that they do after that's also terrible. Like, they roll, and then they roll again, or they spot dodge, or they down smash, or they do whatever, right?
I think the double roll is really good if the first roll is terrible, though. Because then if they can't punish the first roll, you're good.
Yeah, or they roll
What
and
if
they
you just
get
roll
paralyzed and
like
shield.
3 times until you feel safe?
Yeah,
Or 8
Just
times.
roll back and forth across the stage.
It's so good.
and I think that in my mind, like, so a roll, I didn't realize how much time a roll takes. The moment you press a roll, you have an entire half second to
That's like
to
years.
recapture the situation. We play melee. A half second is so long. So while most of the time when I roll, I'm like, how do I get out? What I could be thinking instead is like, I'm rolling. Let me reset the situation and try and see what's happening in that time. And like that could be one way to at the very least stop doing terrible things, even if it is just hang out and shield for a moment.
Yeah, I think that's a good approach. And on that, like, kind of by that same token, if you have the time, I think utilizing all of the time that the game gives you when you respawn is extremely underrated.
I love that idea.
Extremely so, just because, this is kind of something that we just face inevitably because, I don't want to open this can of worms, but 8 minutes is too fucking long. I'm sorry. 8 minutes is just too long. It needs to be shortened.
Make it 6 minutes.
I don't know,
Just
like
not 3 minute. That's
even
the
5 minutes.
That's the
I think
5.
would be fine. But like, just there's this stupid stigma against timeouts in our community because whenever you see a timeout, it's like in the most ridiculous, like absurd, extreme outlier circumstance. Like, I've never actually timed somebody out in a tournament, but like I've tried to, and I've tried to do it like
It's hard.
if I'm playing people and like if I'm experimenting with a strategy that involves like avoiding interaction, it's hard to stretch out the game for 8 minutes, and you have so many opportunities to kill them. Like you're not going to go that long without getting a couple of opportunities to take stocks. It's just too long. But because of that, the flip side is you don't always have to be running in and interacting. You like it's okay to sit back a little bit. And even though I'm not crazy about this. Like, how many times have you seen Mewtwo King camp the edge when he's losing? Probably every single time. Yeah, probably every single time you've seen Mewtwo King play a tournament set. And that's fine. He makes the best of the time he has. But the respawn in particular, like, why wouldn't you just hang out and like think a little bit about what happened in the last stock, or think about like where are you gonna go when you respawn? What's the first thing you're gonna do, and what are you hoping to achieve by going there?
That's a lot to think about in 4 seconds.
Yeah, it is.
4 seconds is a lot of time.
Yeah, 4 seconds.
Like, it really is.
Really, 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 really.
240 frames.
When was the last time one of us actually sat on the platform until it dumped us out into the stage? Like, think about that. Last time you did that.
I remember doing it recently. I don't really do it as much now, but I think like something like that really like it's basically like the opportunity for a breather is just implicitly built into the game, and I think that's fine. You should utilize it.
Yeah, I really like that idea. One other thing that I was trying was I realized that when I practice, and I think a lot of people do this, is when they practice, they try and get the fastest inputs out possible, right? Like, consistently. Like, if it's not the fastest possible, then it doesn't count. It's why we practice multi-shining, right? Because it's hard, in a way. Like, we want to practice on being the...
I practice it because it looks cool.
Yeah, it looks cool.
Yeah.
But in this case, like, just acting on the first actionable frame always looks really cool. And I think that's a really valid thing to practice. I think that's important. But at the same time, in my mind, I view inputs into your controller kind of like blackjack, right? Like, the closer you get to the sweet spot,
you're gonna have to really explain that analogy, man. Like...
Okay. So you have that sweet spot where 21 is exactly what you want in blackjack, right? And 20 is like almost as good, and then so on and so forth. But if you go over, then it's just terrible, right? You're bust. You're toast. You lose the game. And I think Melee is a little bit like that. Because I notice when I practice my flow cancel nairs in place, about a quarter of the time I'm too fast and my character just sits there and does nothing. And I'm like, oh, I was 1 frame too fast. All those times I was 2 frames too slow that I thought were terrible, they weren't actually that bad. It was the time that I was 1 frame too fast that was really, really bad. So I realized that it was my practice that was actually leading me to these situations where when your heart rate is pumping, you're going to move faster, right? That's just the way things work, the way people work. And that I was kind of setting myself up for failure by constantly only practicing the fastest possible thing, and not being satisfied with like 2 or 3 frames slow. And I think that's fine in practice, but I think that it's also important to realize that those are okay in the situation that you're in. Like, to be a tiny bit slow, you don't need to always speed them up, because that can lead to critical failure. You miss an L cancel, or you get something, you start lagging.
I mean, there's definitely a lot to be said for practicing your technique in a way that's easily reproducible, right? Especially like in the heat of the moment. I think we can all agree with that.
Yeah, so hopefully that was a little bit of insight on how to avoid flubs. Now you're a great player and you'll never choke, right?
Yeah. One other thing I want to mention about practice. A lot of people who I see practice things, they try to do it as fast as possible. And also, something that I feel warrants mention is people usually do things repetitively, like directly abutting each other. You know what I mean? So I think, first of all, it's easier to do something in a rhythm. So I think probably giving yourself a little more time in between repetitions, like if you're practicing ledge dashes, get on the ledge and try to do it. And if you mess up, think about like what did I do wrong there? What exactly did I do wrong? You know, was I too fast? What was the wave dash angle wrong? There's a couple of things that could go wrong in that specific case, but like that's usually how it goes if you think about the context of a real match. You know, you don't get like a couple of seconds to wind yourself up, so to speak. You pretty much just kind of have to do something on the spot whenever you're put on the spot to do it. So I think practicing things with that in mind. But as far as the specific problem of avoiding choking, I think having as clear an idea of your desired outcomes as possible is really, really, really valuable. Not just for that specific problem, but just for competition in general. And I think,
contrary to like books like The Inner Game of Tennis, though, and lots of advice on practicing musical technique, because they say you should practice and you should be aware of what you make mistakes, but not think too hard about it, because it's a very physical thing.
Yeah,
so
sure.
You should just like take notice of the result, but not try and force yourself to change necessarily.
Well, I'm not saying force, but another thing that gets mentioned a lot in The Inner Game of Tennis is the idea of conscious observation and being objective rather than making value judgments in your practice and in performance.
And you need to do that like when you're practicing your ledge dash, right? Because if you get frustrated and say I have to do it faster, that's when you completely mess up. You just have to see what you did and then just use that as further information without dwelling on it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, I think that's just about it for our show. Do we have any shout-outs before we close it down?
Shout-outs to Makari, giving me sweet sets at New Game Plus, and driving everyone everywhere. You're a really cool guy.
I
mean, shout-outs to Matt.Zeb for getting second in New Game Plus.
I was just about to say that. Shout-outs to the return of the Zeb. I thought he was playing really well pretty much every set until he faced Mafia.
Sounds pretty typical.
Yeah. I mean, I was happy to see him back. I missed that guy.
Yeah, I mean, good for him. He came out and shout-outs to Schmickeldorf. I agree. Shout-outs to, getting banned for nothing. There was somebody else I wanted to mention. The thing about clear picture of desired outcomes. One thing I was going to mention, a player who I feel exemplifies that is very well is Drug Fox. Because he has an extremely developed idea of what works in the game and how he thinks the game should be played. And I think, like in my case, I know whenever I feel I played my best, it's not really because I played outside of myself or just tapped into something I didn't know I had. It's because I was able to just stick to the stuff that I practiced. and that was able to carry me far enough. So I think he's a really good example of that. So shout outs to Drug Fox, because I think he's an excellent player. I think he could probably, if he works on it enough, and I know he will, be a tier 1 player within like a year or two.
I really like that concept. If you're going to win, it's because of the things that you already have.
Mm-hmm.
So you should just trust in yourself. I really like that. Mm-hmm. All right, I think that's as good a place to close the show as any. Thank you for tuning in, everyone.
Listening.
And thank you, Dave, for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I'd love to be on the show more.
All right. Cheers. See you next week.
Yeah, have a nice night, guys.